everybody. All right, this next chapter, chapter 30, is where we're going to be picking up this week. It says, Bradley remained in his seat after everyone else had gone out to recess, and he walked to Mrs. Ebble's desk. She was sorting papers. Mrs. Ebble, he said timidly, may I use the hall pass? I have to see the counselor. She looked up. Please? Normally, Mrs. Ebble would never allow Bradley Chalkers loose in the halls, but something about the way that he asked must have changed her mind. All right, Bradley, he said, and then she caught herself. But if you're bad, you will never be allowed in the halls of this school again. Thank you. He took the hall pass off the hook behind her desk and headed out the door. You're welcome, Mrs. Ebble said to herself. He knocked on the door to Carla's office. How nice to see you today, Bradley. She greeted him. I appreciate your coming to see me. He shook her hand and then sat around the round table. She was wearing the shirt with squiggles on it. It was the one that she wore the first time he saw her. He liked it, but not as much as the one with the mice. I did my homework last night, he said. Carla beamed. I'm so proud of... I ripped it up. What? I ripped it up. I brought it to school and I was just about to put it on Mrs. Ebble's desk, but then I ripped it up. Carla started to ask, why did I rip it up? He asked her first. I don't know. Why did you? He shrugged. She shrugged. They both giggled. I was afraid you'd be mad, Bradley said when he stopped giggling. Carla shook her head. You did your homework, and that's the important thing, and I'm so very proud of you, Bradley Chalkers. I'm going to do all my homework from now on, he promised. That's wonderful. But what if I keep ripping it up? He asked. Why would you want to do that? I don't know. I didn't think I wanted to rip it up today. The main thing is that you did it, and you learned some things by doing it, didn't you? What of means, said Bradley. What of means? Carla repeated. Times, said Bradley. She stared at him, baffled. Oh, right, she said as it suddenly all connected for her. Okay, so even though you ripped up your homework, you still remember what you learned. You didn't rip up your memory. And when Mrs. Ebble gives the arithmetic test, you'll know how to answer the questions. If they don't change the rules, said Bradley. What rules? Like, what if they decide that of means subtraction? They won't change the rules, Carla assured her, whoever they are. But what if I rip up my test too? He asked. Carla looked at him as if he was being silly. Has Mrs. Ebble given you any homework for tomorrow? She asked. Tomorrow's Saturday. Okay, well, for Monday. No, we never have homework over the weekend. He spoke like an expert, like he'd been doing homework for years. But we do have a book report due next week. Only what? I don't have a book, and Mrs. Wilcott won't let me check out any books from the library. Well, let's see, said Carla. Do you think you might know somebody who might let you borrow a book? Now think about that hard. Bradley looked around at all the books in her office. May I borrow one of yours? He asked. Please, I won't scribble in it. Carla walked around the table and then picked out a book from the stack on top of one of her bookcases. It's my favorite, she said as she gave it to Bradley. And he read the title and laughed. My Parents Didn't Steal an Elephant by Uriah C. Lasso. He opened the page to page 1 and read the first sentence. I hate tomato juice. He thought that was a funny sentence to start a book, so he continued reading. Every morning, Aunt Ruth gives me a glass of tomato juice, and every morning I tell her I hate it. Fine, Dumpling, she always says, don't drink it. She calls me Dumpling. Uncle Boris calls me Cornflake. They're crazy. One of these days, I'm afraid they're going to try to eat me. He glanced up at Carla, and then returned to the book. My parents are in jail. They got arrested for stealing an elephant from the circus, only they didn't do it. If they stole an elephant, I'd know about it, wouldn't I? I mean, if your parents stole an elephant, don't you think you'd know about it? I think the elephant just ran away. Her master was always mean to her. He whipped her and had made her do stupid tricks, and my parents used to complain about it a lot. That's why everybody thinks they stole her. So anyway, that's why I have to live with my crazy Aunt Ruth and my Uncle Boris. If you ask me, they belong in the circus. They're crazy. Uncle Boris always smokes a cigar. It just hangs out of the corner of his mouth, and whenever he kisses my aunt, he swings the cigar out of the way with his tongue, and then he kisses her out of the other side of his mouth. I bet you think Aunt Ruth doesn't like it when he kisses her that way. You're wrong. She always laughs when he does it. Sometimes she smokes a cigar too. I told you they were crazy. Look, he even smokes a cigar while he's drinking tomato juice. The bell rang, and Bradley was amazed by how quickly the time had passed. Do you want to have lunch together again? He asked. I'm sorry. I'm having lunch with the president of the school board, said Carla. I'd much rather eat lunch with you. He didn't mind too much. At least he had her book to read. They shook hands, and then he walked back to class. He placed the hall pass back on the hook and took his seat. He knew he'd write a good book report because he had such a good book to read. I just hope I don't rip it up. Chapter 31. What you doing, Bradley? Asked Ronnie. He's reading, Bartholomew said nastily, and he doesn't want to be disturbed. He thinks he's too good for us now because he does his homework. Oh, be quiet and let him read if that's what he wants to do, said Ronnie. Thanks, Ronnie, said Bradley. I knew you'd understand. And you'd understand, mimicked Bartholomew. Ronnie understood. She knew about Carla. Bradley returned to his book. Uncle Boris and Aunt Ruth are married. I bet you thought you already knew that, except you're not as smart as you think you are. They were my uncle and my aunt even before they got married. Uncle Boris is my mother's brother, and Aunt Ruth is my father's sister. They didn't even know each other until my parents got arrested for stealing the elephant. Then they both came here to take care of me. Ha! They fell in love and got married a week later. It was sickening. You're lucky you weren't here. I've been cheated out of an aunt and an uncle. If they had married somebody else, then I'd have 2 aunts and 2 uncles. Now I only have 1 aunt and 1 uncle, and I wonder what happened to the aunt and the uncle that I don't have. I wonder if they married each other too. Bradley looked up. He tried to make sense out of that last paragraph. It made him think. A lot of the parts of this book made him think. It was one of the things he liked about it. It made him think about his father too, and about why the man who shot him wasn't in jail. There was a knock on the door. His mother entered holding a piece of paper. Oh, you're reading, she said. Well, that's good. It's a good book, he replied. I just got this letter from the Concerned Parents Organization, she said. There's going to be some sort of meeting about Miss Davis, your counselor. Bradley's heart fluttered. It says if I have any complaints that I should come to the meeting. She shrugged her shoulder. I don't have any complaints. She seems to be helping you. Do you have any complaints? Oh, no, he doesn't have any complaints, Claudia laughed, coming in behind her mother. He's in love with her. I heard him say it to his animals. What? Bradley exclaimed in a very high voice. Claudia snickered. Look, Mom, he's blushing. That just proves he loves her. Bradley wished he could crawl under his bed and hide. It doesn't prove anything, said Mrs. Chalkers. Quit teasing your brother. Where'd you get the book, Bradley? Claudia asked as if she already knew the answer. His heart was beating very fast. Carla gave it to me. Carla gave it to him, Claudia repeated. Well, I don't care where he got the book, said Mrs. Chalkers. I'm just happy to see he's reading it. The only reason he's reading it is because he's in love with his teacher, said Claudia. She's not my teacher, she's my counselor, said Bradley. Claudia roared with laughter, and his mother laughed too, but she quickly covered her mouth. I didn't say I was in love with her, Bradley insisted. We were just talking about my counselor, not my teacher, that's all. Are you going to let him marry her, Mom? Asked Claudia. Mrs. Chalker smiled. Well, I don't know. She does seem like a very lovely girl. Bradley felt like he was going to die. His sister was hysterical. So you don't have any complaints about Mrs. Davis? His mother asked seriously, getting back to the letter. She's okay, he said without emotion. Claudia snickered. Well, then I won't go to the meeting, she said. Come on, let's leave your brother alone. The Concerned Parents Organization never likes anything, said Claudia. They're always causing trouble at my school, too. They want to turn kids into robots. Bradley watched his sister and mother walk out of his room and shut the door behind him. Then he lay down on his bed with his face on fire. So I love her. What's wrong with that? Nothing, said Ronnie. They just don't understand about love. The door opened again, and Claudia stuck her face inside and said, if the Concerned Parents Organization ever found out that Carla kissed you, she'd be fired for sure. Chapter 32. Bradley paid close attention as Mrs. Ebel taught arithmetic. He nodded his head every time she said something that he already knew. Once he almost raised his hand to answer a question, but he lost his nerve. Somebody else gave the answer that he would have given. I knew it, he thought as he nodded his head. He had spent recess in the library reading My Parents Didn't Steal an Elephant by Uriah C. Lasso, and when he was leaving the library, Mrs. Wilcott stopped him and said, You were reading, weren't you? Yes. Good for you, Bradley. Good for you. He smiled now as he remembered. It's because of Carla's book, he thought. The book was his lucky charm. As long as he had it with him, it seemed like nothing could go wrong. His black eye was all gone now, too, and when the bell rang for lunch, he put his arithmetic book away, took out his lucky book, and walked to Mrs. Ebel's desk. May I please borrow the hall pass? He asked. She let him have it. He knew she would. He was holding his magic book. He walked to Carla's office, and just as he was raising his fist to knock, she opened the door. "Bradley, what a pleasant surprise. Do you want to have lunch together?" he asked. "Oh, I'm sorry, I can't. I have to go to the principal's office." "What's the matter? Did you get in trouble?" he joked. She didn't laugh at his joke. She shrugged her shoulders and then headed toward the principal's office. Maybe she really did get in trouble, Bradley thought as he watched her go. It's probably because she doesn't believe in rules. She must have broken one without knowing it. I should have warned her. But he wasn't too worried. He couldn't imagine anything bad ever happening to Carla. He walked through the auditorium and outside to the playground, and he sat down on the steps outside of the auditorium and ate his lunch. At last, he had her book with him, and that was almost as good as eating lunch without her. He didn't read while he ate. He was afraid that he might accidentally spill food on the book, even if there were no such things as accidents. Colleen Varigold walked by. "Hello, Colleen," he called to her. She stopped and looked at him oddly, and then walked away without returning his hello. Bradley didn't mind. He had said hello to Colleen because he knew that Carla would appreciate it, and he felt Carla was watching over him. And it didn't matter that Colleen didn't say hello back, because in his heart he heard Carla say, "Hello, Bradley. It's a pleasure to see you today." He finished eating, and then he opened the book. "Guess what they've done now? They wallpapered the garage. I told you they were crazy. Who ever heard of somebody wallpapering on the walls of a garage? Purple paper with yellow polka dots. I don't even know how they got it in there. The garage has been locked shut for months. The lock was broken or something, so nobody could get in. At least I'm glad they finally got it open. It was beginning to smell pretty bad. You could smell it from the driveway. Now it just smells like paste. I can't wait until my parents get home and put an end to all this craziness. Their trial is next week. They have to be found innocent. I mean, if they stole an elephant, I'd know about it, wouldn't I? Where could you hide an elephant?" "Look, he's reading," said Robbie. "I didn't know he knew how to read," laughed Curtis. Bradley looked up. He was surrounded by Jeff and his gang. "He can't read," said Brian. "He just looks at the pictures." They all laughed. "What you reading?" asked Russell. Bradley closed the book and slowly stood on the concrete steps. "Chicken chalkers," said Dan. Andy bounced a basketball, and Bradley glanced behind him. Doug was blocking the door to the auditorium. "What's the matter, Bradley?" he asked. "Hey, Chalkers, what's the name of your book?" asked Robbie. He looked at his book, and then he stared defiantly at Robbie. "Let me see it," said Robbie. Bradley clutched it against his chest, and no matter what he was going to do, he was not going to let them harm Carla's book. "Aw, come on, Bradley. Be a pal," said Robbie. "I just want to see it." Curtis chuckled. Robbie stepped toward him. "You can't read anyway," he said. "Give it to me, and I'll read it to you." And he reached out and rested his hand on the book. Bradley jerked it away. "Uh-oh, I think he's getting angry," said Brian. "I just want to see it," said Robbie. Again, he reached for the book. Bradley held it under his left arm and against his chest. He made his right hand into a fist. Robbie backed away. "Jeff," he called. "Come on, Jeff, teach him a lesson," said Dan. Jeff stepped between Andy and Russell. "All right," said Curtis. "Hold on," said Andy. "Let him get off the steps." The boys backed up, and Bradley, clutching his book, walked down the concrete steps to where Jeff was waiting. "Do you want me to hold your book, Bradley?" said Andy. Bradley glanced at him. "Don't worry," he said sincerely. "I won't hurt it." Bradley handed Andy the book and then looked back at Jeff. They stood on a patch of grass and dirt and faced each other. The bruise around Jeff's eye had turned brown with a greenish tint. Jeff raised his fist. The other boys formed a circle around them. "Come on, get him, Jeff," urged Brian. "Give him another black eye," said Russell. Bradley readied himself. He raised his fist into the air and then lowered them. He had an idea. "Hello, Jeff," he said. Robbie snickered. Jeff stared at him wide-eyed. "Hello, Bradley," he replied, and Bradley smiled and he held out his hand. Jeff smiled too. It was the first honest smile he had had in a long time, and he shook his best friend's hand. The other boys were dumbfounded. No one said a word. Andy finally broke the ice. "Do you like to play basketball, Bradley?" he asked. Bradley looked at him bewildered. "I'm not very good," he said. "So? None of us are," said Jeff, patting him on the back. "Now we'll have even teams," said Robbie. All right. I like that chapter. So we'll see what happens after this. Thanks, guys.